Okay, welcome back everybody to part two of Unpack Men's Mental Health series. This month of November being Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, and today is a special episode. We have Morgan's Message ambassador, Lax player, close friend, Dylan Taylor. Welcome in.
What's up? What's up?
You can give him a few details about yourself, and you could talk about Morgan's Message briefly.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, like Zay said, my name is Dylan. I play lacrosse at Shenandoah. I'm a senior. I've been an ambassador for Morgan's Message since my senior year of high school. And kind of how that came about. So Morgan's mom actually came to my high school and we did like a dedication game. And just a little bit about Morgan. She went to Duke, played women's lacrosse. And unfortunately, she had an injury, like a season-ending injury, and that really affected her mental health. And she wasn't really sharing her struggles with anxiety, things like that, with her family. Unfortunately, ended up taking her own life. So her parents kind of started Morgan's Message, just like break the stigma surrounding that and just raise awareness. Um, you know, but yeah.
Okay, that's where we're gonna jump right into. But like you said, she did have a season. I did my research, my due diligence, if you must. And it was, I think her sophomore year or her freshman year, she had a knee injury. So that's kind of, through looking at it and just seeing how her journey and just being able to kind of familiarize and be kind of close to kind of what she's experiencing, and hopefully helping others, prevent it. And the mission and that her parents set out, that they don't want nobody else, especially other parents, to go through this, is very powerful. So, we'll jump right into it. You said you joined as a senior in high school. What made
Yeah.
you take that step to becoming an ambassador, and how has that shaped you in ultimately your senior year of college now?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, I've been playing sports my whole life. Like, grew up playing football, basketball. Was always active, and for me, that was something that I really like identified myself with. Just being the sports guy, always moving. Um, and it never really like came up, or with my family or like any of my teammates really even. Just that what comes with playing sports like isn't always like pretty on the surface. Like, you're winning games, like, you're competing, you're having fun, but there's also like the other side to it that isn't really brought up as much. And I felt like called to kind of help with that mission, just because as someone who has like struggled with injuries, struggled with maybe not playing as much as I should, or like as much as like I thought I should have, like that
Yeah.
can really like kind of get to you. And if you don't know who to reach out to, you don't know the resources to help with anxiety, depression, like that can really start to build up. And it's a stigma that like I feel like just a lot of people like don't realize how far it can go if you don't like get ahead of it a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. You tapped on a lot of important things, a lot of things that are almost common now with athletes facing, mental health. Like you feel like you might not be playing enough as you're supposed to, or just the load management, especially getting to college. Nobody's prepared for the load you truly have, because truly, in high school it was class, practice, home. Like now, it almost flips. I say like college athletics is almost a job. Like some people may not understand it, but truly, like it really feels like a job, because it's every day, all day. Like even when you go to class, you probably have some assignment. You got a meeting. You got things you got to uphold. So what you said is truly important and part of the problem. Part of the stigma that arises with that.
Y-
When did you realize, or you might have experienced like a prominent moment that it was like, men's or mental health is in itself for athletes is very important and a problem that needed to be solved?
Yeah. So I think it was my sophomore year, I believe. I had like I had a concussion. And that's something that I've dealt with concussions like playing football and whatnot.
Mhm.
But it really did kind of get to me, like, not being on the field, like not really feeling like connected with my teammates. And a big thing for me, like, with growing up playing sports is that it was kind of like my outlet. So, if I was like ever like struggling, like, I knew I could go like shoot, I could go
Yeah.
out, just get like take a little time to like reset. And not having that, it kind of made me realize that like I was relying on like the sport to take away from that. And without that, I kind of was struggling to like find other outlets.
Yeah, like live almost.
You know, yeah. Um, so, it's something too that like you don't really understand until you're in those shoes. And then like you get put in that position and it's like, all right, like I need help. Like I need someone to talk to about this.
No, I feel you. I relate almost to you. Our sophomore year in college. What was it? My first ever real injury. I ever had to sit out for months on end. Like
Hmm.
I was like, "You, what do you mean I can't play a sport? I can't go. I couldn't even go play basketball. Just in case. Like, and it opened up my eyes. Like truly, like I kind of got to understand who am I without sports? Like, if sports is never a thing, who would I be? And that's like a big question. I feel like a lot of college athletes, don't have the answer to and are forced to have the answer to. In
Yeah.
4 years, you could play all 4 years, but eventually some people aren't going to be lucky enough to go pro, and it's like you got to answer that question. And I feel like that's
Yeah.
where a lot of problems stem from, because also the resources to help some athletes figure that question out aren't available or aren't readily accessible for them. So that's definitely a problem. I feel like that needs to be addressed. With you saying you played a lot of, young athlete, young sports, a lot of people play sports, like I say, since they came out the womb. Do you feel like this problem stems from being told at like a young age, like you got to be strong and just maneuver on through and it just carries on? Or do you think this is something that just develops maybe in high school or later?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's kind of like a lot of factors that play into it, like, your family life, your social life. Um, but I definitely think, um, you know, with it being Men's Mental Health Month, I think that's something like as men we kind of have like struggled with, of where like, oh, it's like tough it,
Yeah.
like stick it out, like be a man, like, um, which kind of just like degrades what you know you're feeling or what you're going through. Um, but yeah, sorry, I'm not really answering your question well here.
All right, good, man.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's also just like a lot of pressure to succeed, and like with that, like, um, yeah, I'm drawing a blank here.
You are actually what you said with the problem to succeed or struggling to succeed. That kind of goes into something else that I had written down. Like, do you believe like ability equals strength? Because almost with men, this is Men's Mental Health Month, so this is for everybody. But we're going to use men just to talk about it. The problem I feel stems from they don't want to talk, or we may not want to talk about it to our coaches or peers, because it's almost like your ability is your strength. Like availability is the best ability, they say, and it's like
Hmm.
if you tell someone you're struggling or you're lacking mentally, where it's like the trainers can't even help you physically, and this is something that you gotta protect, or you gotta figure out. It's like you're deemed weak. Do you feel like that's like ineffective in our sport, and that adds to a problem because the men are, it's like man up, be strong, but when you're having a problem, you can't even address that problem because you're going to be deemed weak.
Yeah, for sure. I think it also kind of ties into like vulnerability and kind of like the fear of being vulnerable, and like just that perception of like, oh, I'm not good enough. I got hurt, so I'm letting people down, and I can't be seen as weak.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I definitely think those kind of like tie together.
Okay, I definitely agree, because that's just something I always thought of. Like you're told almost as a kid, like you got to man up, you got to figure it out, and it's almost when you get to college and these things really start, building up. Eventually, you can't hide something for so long. Like eventually, it's going to topple over, but you can't even express yourself almost. And it's almost like Thierry Henry, Arsenal. Well, I hate saying that word. Soccer player.
Yeah, I'm not a
If
big
I feel like if I
soccer
showed you a
guy, but
picture,
so I'm
I'll
not
show you a
familiar.
picture. Yeah, I'll show you a picture next time I
Okay.
see you. I feel like you're gonna know what I'm talking about. But
All
he
right.
or saying admitted, he had a interview and he spoke about the depression he faced. He said like he adapted to his depression. Like he knows he probably woke up depressed, but it was almost like he adapted to it because he's playing on the world's biggest stage. Like he can't sit back and be complacent or anything. So my question, to you or to the viewers itself, why do you feel like athletes adapt rather than acknowledge? Like it's kind of going on the weak thing, but why do we feel like adaptation is better than just acknowledging the problem? It's almost like you see a dish break, and instead of cleaning up the dish, you'll rather just walk over it or walk around it.
Mm, yeah, I think that kind of just makes me think, as athletes, like you're working towards, winning that next game, like making it to the championship, and I
Yeah.
think just kind of that, like you're striving to improve and to be the best version of yourself that you can be. And it kind of just, I guess to some, it could feel like you're kind of like not like giving up, but like it's easier to like, okay, yeah, this is happening, but I can do this and I can do this, and then like I'm sure like later on like it'll work itself out, or like I'll deal with it later, and then
Yeah.
eventually like that's not always like gonna work, like with mental health, like those things do kind of tend to like circle back around, and if you're not going to acknowledge that, like it can tend to topple over itself, as you're saying.
Yeah. Almost like, hey, I had a good one on my head, but almost it's like a reoccurring thing, and then the more you push it over, the more you can push it away so many times that eventually, when you least are ready for it, it can be too much almost.
Hmm.
Going with you being a Morgan's message ambassador, I know y'all are big on campus. Y'all are, you feel me, working on campus, ambassador for mental health for everybody. What do you think true support starts with, or what does true support look like?
Yeah, I think just, well, first off, a big thing is like your team, and just fostering like an environment where it's like you can speak up if you're going through things, and also just like not like judging others, kind of just like that culture, that environment where it's like um it's okay to not be okay, like and if you need to reach out, like you have these people that are willing to help you out in any way they can. And then I think it's just like being a part of the club, like it's like really just it's cool to like when we do the meetings, like having everyone there, it's kind of just like it's like a culture thing,
Yeah.
and it's like with athletics, a lot of the struggles, like people have been through similar things, and like you can kind of just relate to them, and kind of just help each other out, grow together.
Yeah, I feel you. That's almost like a lot of people may ask, or we spoke about it briefly about just me doing this. Like, I kind of through my own trials and tribulations, you may say, I've realized like a lot of the things that I may be going through, a lot of people almost go through, maybe not the exact same thing, but on the theme of the thing. You feel me? Like a lot of people
Hmm.
had to face, like me, Terra might say, a lot of people went through it. One of my best friends is actively going through, rehab and doing this. So it's to get through things. Like a lot of people may say you got to go through it individually. Like I'm almost an ambassador for isolation, but I also know like if you go into isolation, there should be people like people that know you're in isolation. There should be
Hmm.
people that should always have the ability, no matter how deep into isolation you go, that should always be able to get a conversation out of you because as much as you may need it, they may need it more for the sanity of you. You feel me? To be there for you and support you. So that's I always like the more like, especially I be seeing everything y'all do, and I've always been a big fan. You feel me? I talked to Cassidy today, and
Hmm.
it just knowing what y'all done and putting this club together. What it's been 2 years now.
Yeah,
Two
yeah, two
years, yeah. It's
years.
just been. I can only imagine how much far it's gonna go. So I'm definitely I'm very happy for that. And then just going back into Morgan's message itself, over 6,000 ambassadors. So it's not even a lot of people you could say is doing this, but that's 6,000 people is a lot of people, you
Yeah,
know.
for sure. Hmm.
And over out here, over 1,770 and counting clubs. So hopefully, as time goes on, I hope to look back at this number maybe even a few months from now and just see how big the number is growing. With Morgan's message, I did some due diligence. I just love due diligence in anything, but also things that I'm doing.
Hmm.
Morgan's best friend says something very powerful that I like. I had to write down and highlight in my own notebook. She
Hmm.
said this word called botho. Uh, I forget which African country she was in. I want to say it was Kenya. But
Hmm.
she adopted the word botho and said, "I am because you are," and basically named her letter to Morgan that. And it was very powerful because her saying "I am because you are" just shows like no matter how helpless you may feel, somebody else is the way they are because you impacted them in the life you're living.
Hmm.
And I just
Yeah, that's powerful.
I really I can't even put into words how much like I read that and I immediately had to write it down and almost had to talk to you about like do you have any words that you kind of tell yourself or any phrases that you have to yourself? Like obviously it doesn't have to be something of relating to somebody else or anything like that, but do you have phrases to yourself like that you may use or phrases you may even spread to others?
Yeah, I mean, a big one like would just be like I think I mentioned it earlier, but like, it's okay to not be okay. Like,
Mhm.
um, you know, it, you don't have to be perfect. Like you're gonna have obstacles, you're gonna have things that come up. And there's no shame in having to reach out, to somebody if you need like just a conversation, advice, anything like that. Um, and I know like you had kind of brought it up a little bit earlier, but like with like the isolation stuff like that, like that's something that I like. I don't know. I feel like it's like a line too. You know what I mean?
Yes, it definitely is.
And if you're not careful, like that line can be like you can find yourself on the wrong side of that line.
Mhm.
Um, but I feel like yeah, um, that's something that I'll tell myself. Like if I'm ever like whether it's school, it's like sports, social life, anything like that, like that's something that I just have like over time kind of adopted just because like I have found myself in those kind of like pits to where like I'm not really reaching out to my loved ones, stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. That I feel like everybody, like you said, isolation. Yeah, it definitely is a fine line. Like I found myself teetering the line myself, but that's like when I mentioned earlier. You gotta have people that you have almost allowed in your life, like to be able to pull you back across that line. Like, hey, you're done with your isolation phase almost. You feel what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So back to more. I just like to say I keep reiterating it, but just the representation of Morgan's message. Like I just think maybe a lot. I feel like almost a lot of athletes, despite how much they may say they might not go through something, everybody goes through something, especially in collegiate athletics. And from your freshman to your senior year, you're bound to experience at least one thing a year. One thing where you feel like you can't handle it. As a freshman, you might come in and not play. Then you want to transfer, but you may stick around and things like that. So just representation of Morgan's message is it's just been very powerful to keep pushing this positive message. With that, I also have written down that mental health is just as important as physical health. Like as mentioned earlier, you could go to your coach and tell your coach, hey, my ankle's not feeling good, or my elbow's bad, my knee's bad, and you can get that day off practice. You go to the trainer and tell them, and they're going to get you that day off practice. But I feel like there should be an avenue just for the same thing as mental health. Like some days you're not able to compete because some days you might not be able to go to class. So how can you even go to this practice that, for us, I would say Mondays and Thursdays, hardest practices of the week. Like those are the practices you're competing. And it's like, how can you just played a game on Wednesday. You may not have played. You feel like you definitely should have played. You got to wake up Thursday, with that dread of a feeling you have, and then have to go perform at a high level, that Thursday night and you're not all there. And I feel like there should be an avenue in some way, shape, or form that allows for athletes to be able to say that.
Yeah, and I definitely agree that like physical health and mental health should be on the same um, kind of playing field. Like they're both equally as impactful. Um, and that's like one thing that I think is cool, like being with Morgan's message and kind of just spreading awareness. Is talking to coaches and having them kind of understand that like with these players, like there's a lot going on. And like as you said, it's like, there's things going on outside of just the field to where it's like you might not even know like what they're going through. Um um yeah, I definitely do like relate to you when with like days of like the week, like Mondays like being tough, like it's like all right, like you got these back-to-back practices, things like that.
Yeah, so just to wrap this, I have a few statistics almost from doing my due diligence, as I say, and it's just looking at a lot of athletes and preventing them from. One athlete said they felt worthless almost, like they got injured and they felt worthless, like they had nothing to bring, not only to themselves but to the people around them. And going off of that, there are about 30% that face mental health issues, and then another 33%, excuse me, that have significant symptoms of anxiety, depression. And these are all college athletes, kids 17 to, we'll say 23, but we know some people be about 25, but we won't even dive into that topic.
Yeah, the red shirts
Yeah,
and
we won't even
whatnot.
dive into that. But do you have, to wrap it up, do you have any, actionable takeaways or things for others that they can do, to get through this and just know that is always support?
Yeah. I mean, first, I think just fostering like that openness with like the people you're around is really important. Um, just like having a support system is really important, and especially like with your parents, family, loved ones, like keeping like communication open, keeping and being honest too. I think that's really important. And you kind of have to look at yourself and be honest, and you know, I think just with the culture of like sports, like kind of what we're talking about, it's always like we're trying to like get to that next level, like get to be better, um, and sometimes you kind of have to take a step back and be like vulnerable and honest with yourself about what's going on. Um, another thing I think is there's like with therapy, like that's something that is kind of like stigmatized against, like oh, like I'm weak if I like have to go to a therapist. Like I think that's just completely off, and that like there's nothing wrong with having to reach out to somebody to talk to.
Definitely. Well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time. First of all, just to give support to everybody. Like, if there's always somebody to help you. If you're listening and you feel like you're going through something. But thank you, Dylan. Thank you.
Hey,
For being a
appreciate you
part
for
of
having me
Morgan's
on.
messages, taking the time to do this. Spread
Yeah,
good support and good help for everybody that may need it.
yeah, for sure. And I appreciate you for having me on. Really grateful that you're willing to take the time to bring awareness to this topic. And if anyone needs to reach out, like feel free.
Definitely.
But yeah, I appreciate you, man.
Definitely. Thank you again, and thank you for everybody that watched. Be sure to comment who you may want to see next. Another topic we may need to cover next time.